Imagine waking up next to someone you've loved for 2 years.
Right, the person you share everything with.
Exactly. You know their smell, their habits. I mean, you know the precise way they take their coffee in the morning.
You've built a whole life together.
Yeah, you've shared your deepest fears, your family history, your dreams for the future. And then in one single, just shattering moment, you discover that absolutely none of it was real.
It's completely terrifying to even think about.
It really is. Like, their entire personality, your courtship, your marriage, all of it was meticulously engineered. A completely fabricated operation run by the secret police
Specifically designed to infiltrate your life, yeah.
and spy on your family. That is the terrifying reality facing Rebecca Hoffman in East Berlin, 1961. So today we are doing a deep dive into an absolute masterclass in deception
We really are. We're looking at exactly how intimacy is weaponized by the state.
and what it takes for the human spirit to survive when your very reality is stolen from you.
Because, it really is the ultimate violation. We so often think of espionage in terms of, stolen documents or wiretaps.
Right, like dead drops in dimly lit parks.
Exactly, the classic spy stuff. But the most insidious form of infiltration doesn't happen in a government building. It happens in a living room.
Or a marriage bed.
Yeah. And to really grasp the weight of what happens to Rebecca, we have to immerse ourselves in the environment she's navigating. This isn't just any city.
No, it's East Berlin, 1961.
Right. And it's a place that is fundamentally almost schizophrenic in its architecture and its psychology.
From the sources we have, it sounds like a totally fractured world. You have these beautiful, graceful old streets.
But they still bear the physical scars of wartime bombing.
Yeah, and they're sitting right next to these brutalist, ugly, ill-matched concrete buildings that the new regime is just throwing up everywhere.
I'd actually go a step further. It's not just fractured. The source text shows us a society built on a foundation of profound cognitive dissonance.
How so?
Well, the physical landscape is kind of the perfect external manifestation of the psychological landscape. People are walking past the rubble of a catastrophic fascist defeat,
Right.
straight into the sterile, concrete embrace of a totalitarian communist state. And this society is actively hemorrhaging its future.
You mean the brightest minds leaving?
Exactly. The doctors, the engineers, the teachers, they are quite literally vanishing across the border to the west.
Because, just to set the timeline, the Berlin Wall hasn't been built yet. It's early 1961.
Right, the border is still porous enough. If you're desperate, you can just leave.
And the people left behind, the ones who stay out of loyalty or fear or, family ties, they're forced to navigate this incredibly dense, invisible maze of state-sponsored paranoia.
Every single interaction is loaded with potential fatal danger. A chat with a neighbor, a classroom lesson.
Even a disagreement with a spouse.
Absolutely.
Ugh.
Which makes the illusion of safety so utterly intoxicating for someone like Rebecca.
Let's look at Rebecca and her husband, Hans. On paper, and from the outside, this is a rare success story in a very bleak world.
It really seems that way at first.
We first see them doing the most mundane thing possible. The morning commute. Hans is dropping her off at work in his tan Trabant 500.
And we shouldn't just gloss over the Trabant.
No, definitely not.
In the context of the German Democratic Republic, driving a Trabant wasn't just, a matter of having enough money to buy a car. It was a massive sociological indicator.
Wait, really? It was that big of a deal?
Oh, yeah. The waiting list for one of these cars could be years, sometimes over a decade.
Wow, a decade for a car.
Yeah. So to have one, especially as a relatively young man, signaled to the world and to Rebecca that Hans was a compliant, approved, and stable member of the state apparatus.
Oh, it's a prop.
Exactly. It's a prop in his performance of normalcy.
That is such a crucial detail. It's this subtle signal of safety. And the deeper we look into their relationship, the more we realize that Hans has presented himself as the exact bespoke solution to everything Rebecca was subconsciously looking for.
He really did. She comes from a very strong, principled family.
Right. Her father, Werner, is this authoritative, confident man. She wants a partner who can match that energy.
But who still listens to her and respects her autonomy. And Hans steps into that space flawlessly.
But the real hook, according to the deep dive into their past, is the political alignment.
That's the most dangerous part. Rebecca holds strong anti-communist views.
And in East Germany, holding those views is like walking around with a live grenade in your pocket.
Literally. Yet Hans, who supposedly works as a civil servant for the Ministry of Justice, miraculously shares her political skepticism.
He validates her most dangerous thoughts.
Right. During this car ride, we see him perfectly playing the role of the disillusioned bureaucrat.
He actually tells her, I think the quote from the text is, "The courts serve the judges, the lawyers, the police, the government, everyone except the victims of crime."
And then he twists the knife perfectly.
Yeah. He adds that while this corruption is expected in capitalist countries, under communism, the courts are supposed to serve the people.
And he claims his colleagues just don't get it. It's a masterstroke of psychological manipulation.
Because it creates a bond, right?
Exactly. By voicing a mild philosophical critique of the state, he creates a shared secret between them. He makes her feel like they are in the trenches together.
The two sane people in a world gone mad.
Exactly. And at the same time, he builds a brilliant defensive fortress around his actual job.
But when she asks to meet his colleagues,
Right. When she naturally asks to go to work functions or meet his friends, he shuts it down with agonizing dullness.
he tells her they would bore you. They're all lawyers.
He actively makes his professional life sound so mind-numbingly tedious that she never even considers looking closer.
It reminds me of algorithmic targeted advertising, but weaponized in the physical world.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
You know, when you complain out loud about, like, a sore lower back, and 2 hours later your phone serves you an ad for a very specific ergonomic lumbar support chair.
Yeah, the algorithm was listening.
Right. Hans didn't just casually bump into Rebecca at a cafe. He absorbed her data.
The secret police mapped her feminism, her political leanings.
Her desire for a strong but attentive partner. And Hans literally engineered his entire personality to be the exact product she was desperate to buy.
That analogy hits the nail on the head because the psychological mechanics of Stasi training were essentially algorithmic.
She relied on data collection, right?
Exhaustive data collection. They didn't rely on intuition. Before Hans ever initiated that chance meeting with Rebecca, he had likely studied wiretap transcripts.
Wow.
He read her intercepted mail, reviewed reports from neighbors. He knew her vulnerabilities before she even knew his name.
But that raises a profound psychological question for me. So he builds this algorithmic profile. He becomes exactly what she wants.
Right.
But to maintain that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, doesn't he lose himself?
What do you mean?
Well, you can't maintain a performance that deep without actually becoming the person, at least a little bit, right?
Right.
Is it possible for a lie this depth to be maintained without the liar losing their own identity?
I'd challenge the idea that he becomes the person because that implies a genuine transformation. What actually happens is much more sinister.
Okay, how so?
It's compartmentalization taken to a pathological extreme. To make a lie of this magnitude convincing, you do have to invest real emotional energy.
You simulate the love.
You simulate love, empathy, and shared outrage so perfectly that the muscle memory of the relationship feels real, but the core identity of the operative remains completely detached.
Like they're watching from the outside.
Exactly, observing the simulation from behind soundproof glass.
So the intimacy is just a mechanic of the job.
Precisely. Which forces us to ask the most important question: why deploy this incredibly resource-intensive operation against Rebecca?
Yeah, she's a secondary school teacher. She doesn't have access to military blueprints or state secrets.
It's all about the network. She is the vulnerable entry point into a highly suspect family tree.
Right, let's talk about her family. Her father, Werner, is a capitalist. He literally owns a factory in West Berlin.
Which means he has wealth, Western connections, and influence.
And her mother, Carla, is a well-known social democrat. She actually served as a city councilor during a brief period of post-war democracy.
And if that wasn't enough, her grandmother, Maud, is the sister of a British earl.
You couldn't engineer a family more terrifying to the East German state if you tried.
They represent everything the regime is trying to eradicate: capitalism, democratic socialism, and Western aristocracy.
But because of their status and connections, the Stasi can't just kick their door down in the middle of the night.
No, that would cause an international incident or massive unrest. They need inside access. They need to map the web of influence.
So they find the daughter, the one who desires love, who desires stability.
And they plant a human Trojan horse right in the center of her living room.
It is so incredibly dark to realize that her search for a safe harbor was exactly what made her a target.
It's tragic.
And while she believes her marriage is this sanctuary, her professional life is an absolute nightmare. The moment she steps out of that Trabant and into the Friedrich Engels Polytechnic Secondary School, we see the macro-level collapse of the society.
The school is really a microcosm of the national crisis. We mentioned the brain drain earlier, but seeing it play out in the daily life of a teacher is staggering.
Half the faculty has fled to West Germany.
Half of them. And they aren't just leaving for political freedom, they are leaving for basic economic survival.
Higher salaries.
Higher salaries, the ability to teach without a state censor breathing down their necks. Even the headmaster, a man named Anselm Weber, who supposedly towed the party line.
Because you absolutely had to be a loyal communist to get that job, right?
Right. Even he has vanished across the border to Western prosperity.
Imagine the sheer bleak absurdity of Rebecca's day. She is trained as a Russian language teacher.
But the state has chased away all the competent English teachers.
So she is suddenly forced to teach English classes. And she doesn't even speak English.
She only knows a smattering of phrases she picked up from her British grandmother.
The coping mechanisms people develop under these systems are both tragic and hilarious.
Oh, absolutely. She is standing in front of a classroom of expectant students, and to fill the time, she's improvising an English lesson.
By writing the lyrics to Chubby Checker's The Twist on the chalkboard.
Right. Let's do the twist.
It's funny, but it highlights a profound systemic dysfunction. And there's a massive irony here, according to the source material. The school itself is described as a modern, well-equipped building.
The regime loves to boast that they are serious about education. They pour concrete, they buy desks, they build the infrastructure.
But their demand for political loyalty over competence completely destroys their own stated goals.
Their ideological rigidity ruins it.
Exactly. It's like they built this beautiful state-of-the-art race car, but they demand that only people holding a specific political membership card are allowed to drive it.
So all the actual competent drivers leave.
And the beautiful car just sits there rotting.
Mm-hmm.
And Bern Held, the deputy head of the school, is the ultimate manifestation of this failure.
Bern is a fascinating figure. Outside of her family, he is arguably Rebecca's closest confidant.
He's a physics teacher, right?
Yes, deeply intelligent and a wounded war veteran. He carries a shrapnel scar from defending the Silo Heights against the Red Army at the end of the war.
So he's seen a lot.
Objectively speaking, with Headmaster Anselm gone, Bernd is the most qualified, experienced person to run that school.
But he is entirely passed over for the promotion.
Because he refuses to join the SED, the Socialist Unity Party.
Right. In this regime, competence is entirely secondary to compliance. If you aren't in the party, you cannot hold a position of authority.
Regardless of your brilliance.
And Rebecca deeply respects him for that refusal, because she feels exactly the same way. The text points out she thinks joining the SED would be like checking herself into a lunatic asylum and being forced to pretend all the other inmates were completely sane.
That's a powerful way to put it.
It really is. And it's during a quiet, stolen moment in the lunchroom with Bernd that the crushing weight of her personal life finally spills over into the open.
Rebecca is exhausted. She is carrying around this agonizing, isolating suspicion about her husband.
And she finally breaks down. She knows Bernd is a good, grounded man.
Crucially, she also knows he is divorced.
Right. So she takes a massive risk and asks him point blank how he knew his wife was having an affair.
She starts listing the clues she's been cataloging in her own home, trying to make sense of them.
Silent phone calls where the person abruptly hangs up when she answers.
Hans tearing up small pieces of paper into microscopic fragments and flushing them down the toilet.
Sudden, unexplained weekend meetings.
Hours spent sequestered away, writing things he vehemently refuses to let her see.
To anyone with a background in intelligence, these are glaring, textbook signs of espionage craft.
Oh, completely. The silent phone calls are handler check-ins or abort signals. The flush notes are destroyed cipher pads or dead drop coordinates.
And the weekend meetings are debriefings. But what does Bernd do with this information?
He completely misdiagnoses it.
Because his wife actually did cheat on him with another person.
Right. So when he hears Rebecca's list of bizarre behaviors, he filters all of it through the lens of his own deeply personal trauma.
He looks at her with genuine sadness and says, "You're talking about Hans. He's got a lover, hasn't he?"
It's a brilliant, tragic observation on the limits of human perception. We can only process the world through the vocabulary of our own lived experiences.
That makes total sense. Bernd cannot fathom that Hans is a state intelligence officer running a covert, multi-year psychological operation on his own wife.
That is simply too monstrous, too sociopathic for a normal, empathetic person to conceptualize.
Infidelity, while incredibly painful, is mundane.
It's an ordinary human failing. State-sponsored matrimonial espionage is practically science fiction to the average citizen.
And because Bernd is the voice of reason in her life, he inadvertently validates her entirely wrong fears. He gives her the ordinary explanation.
And it's heartbreaking because Rebecca reveals a deep, aching vulnerability in this moment.
Hmm.
She tells Byrne that she just wanted a family.
She takes the blame upon herself. She notes that their physical intimacy is infrequent. They only make love about once a week.
She assumes this is her fault, a byproduct of a very dark trauma in her past.
But despite all of this, she looks Burned in the eye and tells him, "I would never leave. Marriage is a promise. You have to keep it against your inclination."
You have to keep it against your inclination. That single sentence tells you everything you need to know about Rebecca's moral architecture.
She believes in absolute loyalty.
She believes in enduring personal hardship for the sake of a sacred vow. She is willing to sacrifice her own happiness to maintain the integrity of the commitment she made.
And that fundamental goodness, that honorable stoicism, is exactly the lever the Stasi is pulling to destroy her.
They rely on the decency of their targets to maintain the trap.
She is trying so hard to process what she believes is an agonizing but normal betrayal of infidelity. But just as she's grappling with this, the state physically intrudes into her day.
Before we get to the moment she is summoned by the Stasi, though, we need to pause and look backward.
Right, because Rebecca is trying desperately to rationalize Hans's strange behavior as just work pressure. But there was a moment during their courtship where that rationalization was almost blown apart.
The mask actually slipped.
Yes, the car crash incident. Let's talk about that.
This is a vital piece of the psychological puzzle because it demonstrates that maintaining a total 247 fabrication is incredibly difficult, even for a highly trained operative.
The human nervous system wasn't built to sustain a lie of that magnitude indefinitely.
No, it really wasn't.
So let's set the scene based on the text. They are dating, they're driving, and they get into a very minor, entirely mundane traffic accident.
And it is 100% the other driver's fault.
Now, think about how a normal person reacts to a fender bender. You get annoyed, maybe your heart rate spikes, you yell.
You exchange insurance information, you grumble about the inconvenience.
Exactly. But Hans doesn't do that. Hans completely loses his mind.
He erupts into what Rebecca describes as a vindictive rage.
He flashes his Department of Justice ID, calls the police, and actually uses his authority to have the other driver arrested and thrown in a jail cell for dangerous driving.
Over a scratched bumper.
It's wild.
It is a terrifying phenomenon. We are witnessing unchecked, absolute state power bleeding out of the shadows and into the civilian world.
In that split second of adrenaline, Hans forgets that he is playing the role of a mild-mannered, disillusioned administrator.
The deep cover training fails. His true identity, a Stasi lieutenant who possesses the literal power to destroy a citizen's life with the snap of his finger surfaces.
I look at it like a micro-expression of power. You know how behavioral psychologists talk about micro-expressions?
Right, those tiny, involuntary flashes of emotion on a person's face.
Yeah, the ones that reveal their true feelings before their conscious brain can suppress them. This was a behavioral micro-expression.
That's a great comparison.
Try to imagine the psychology of power. When you hold the power of a god in your day job, when you can disappear people into secret prisons, ruin careers, tear families apart, it becomes almost neurologically impossible to pretend to be a mere mortal during a stressful traffic dispute.
The muscle memory of absolute authority just kicks in. The instinct to crush the annoyance overrides the mission.
The muscle memory of absolute authority. That is exactly it. And it terrifies Rebecca.
She sees this monstrous vindictiveness, this total lack of proportion.
And she is so frightened by the stranger she sees in that moment that she seriously considers ending the relationship right there.
Every survival instinct she has is screaming at her to run.
But she doesn't run. Why?
Because of that vulnerability we talked about with Burned. She wanted a family. She wanted a strong partner.
Hans comes back later. He apologizes profusely. He blames it on immense pressure at work, and she accepts the excuse.
She takes the red flag, folds it up, and puts it in a drawer.
Because the human desire for the illusion to be real is stronger than the terrifying truth of her intuition.
We constantly negotiate with our own intuition when our deepest desires are on the line. We accept the mundane excuse work pressure because the alternative is too destabilizing.
But that abstract work pressure is about to manifest in Rebecca's life in the most concrete, terrifying way possible.
Which brings us back to her day at the school.
Right. She finishes her shift, still reeling from her conversation with Burned, and she goes to the staff room to check her pigeonhole.
And sitting right there is a single sheet of paper.
The letterhead reads, Ministry for State Security, the Stasi.
It's a summons from a Sergeant Schultz ordering her to present herself at headquarters for questioning.
We have to pause and emphasize the sheer paralyzing existential terror of receiving this piece of paper. This isn't a jury duty summons or an audit notice from the IRS.
No, in East Germany, receiving a letter from the Stasi means the invisible watchers have finally turned their eye toward you.
And the psychological trap is already fully set before you even walk out your front door.
Because the logic of totalitarianism is entirely circular and totally infallible.
If the secret police want to question you, you must be guilty of something.
There is no presumption of innocence. If you politely suggest they might have the wrong person or made an administrative error, you are actively insulting the competence of the state apparatus.
Which in itself is treated as a subversive crime. It's purely Kafkaesque. You are guilty by virtue of being summoned.
It is the bureaucracy of terror, designed to strip away your autonomy before the interrogation even begins.
So Rebecca has no choice. She travels to the Stasi headquarters in the suburb of Lichtenberg on Normanenstrasse.
And the physical architecture of the place is aggressively hostile.
It's an ugly, imposing new office block surrounded by mud and scaffolding. It presents a grim, impenetrable face to the street, especially in the rain.
She walks in, she takes the elevator up, and the environment is designed to induce sensory deprivation and anxiety.
The text mentions the corridor is painted a nightmarish shade of mustard yellow.
She is ushered into a bare, windowless room containing nothing but a cheap plastic table and metal tubing chairs.
The air is thick with the pungent chemical smell of fresh paint.
The entire space is engineered to make the citizen feel incredibly small, entirely sterile, and profoundly isolated from the rest of humanity.
And then her interrogator walks in, Sergeant Schultz. And immediately, Rebecca's sharp intellect picks up on a crucial detail.
Schultz is young. He's maybe 25, significantly younger than she is.
He's carrying a very thin file, not a thick dossier. He clears his throat and aggressively frowns, clearly trying to project an aura of seasoned authority that he simply doesn't possess.
He's a rookie. He is green, incompetent, and trying to punch above his weight.
He sits down and immediately attacks her on the most bizarre tangent. He accuses her of lying on her official documents about her age.
He leans in and says, "You state your mother is 39 and you are 29. How could she possibly have given birth to you when she was 10 years old?"
And here, the interrogation accidentally rips open a deeply traumatic chapter of Rebecca's past.
Right, but she is able to provide a completely innocent explanation to his accusation.
She's adopted. Her biological parents were killed at the very end of the Second World War when their house suffered a direct hit from artillery fire.
She was 13 years old, suddenly orphaned, and wandering alone in the apocalyptic ruins of a destroyed city.
And this is where we have to recognize the immense, exhausting cognitive load required just to exist and speak in this society.
Because the reality of how she was saved is steeped in political danger.
The truth, as detailed in the source, is that as a young, orphaned girl in the ruins of Berlin, she was singled out for assault by a group of Soviet Red Army soldiers.
Carla Frank, the woman who would become her adopted mother, intervened and offered herself to the soldiers instead.
Sacrificing her own bodily autonomy to save the young girl.
That horrific sacrifice is the bedrock of their profound, unbreakable bond.
And it's the unspoken root of Rebecca's own hesitations around physical intimacy with Hans.
But watch how Rebecca has to navigate this in front of the Stasi.
Right. She begins to say, "Carla saved me from," and then her internal censor slams the brakes.
It says, acknowledging that the glorious Soviet Red Army committed war crimes and mass assaults during the fall of Berlin is highly illegal.
It is considered state-sanctioned historical revisionism to suggest the liberators were brutal.
She has to actively edit her own trauma in real time.
She is sitting across from a secret police officer, her heart pounding, and she has to carefully omit the contentious details of her own mother's sacrifice.
Simply stating that Carla saved her from the rubble and legally adopted her.
If she tells the full truth of her own life, she commits a political crime.
It's a perfect encapsulation of life under a totalitarian regime. The state doesn't just control the present, it demands absolute control over your memories of the past.
But Schultz, lacking the intelligence to push deeper, and clearly not possessing the highly classified file on her politically dangerous family, abruptly pivots.
Since he can't pin document fraud on her, he attacks her for the English lesson at the school.
He accuses her of actively poisoning the minds of East German youth with American propaganda, simply because she used a handout that was originally meant for American soldiers.
Which, as we discussed, is utterly absurd. She only used it because the state's own policies drove the English teachers out of the country.
But Rebecca finds her footing here. She pushes back. She actually raises her voice, and shouts at him that she doesn't even speak English.
That she's a Russian teacher doing her best in an impossible situation.
And to her surprise, Schultz is cowed. He realizes she isn't the soft, easily intimidated target he thought she was.
And then he executes the most chilling, absurd pivot of the entire encounter.
He asks her to become a Stasi informant.
After accusing her of fraud and subversive propaganda, he completely changes his tone, leans in, and says, "We need intelligent people, especially women, to keep their eyes open. Let us know when things are going wrong."
This moment requires us to look at the structural mechanics of East German control. The Stasi didn't operate on passive obedience.
It required active complicity. They relied on a doctrine known as Zersetzung, or psychological decomposition.
Which utilized a massive decentralized network of ordinary citizens betraying each other.
Yeah.
I think people vastly underestimate the scale of this. How many people were actually informants?
The statistics are staggering. By the time the Berlin Wall fell, it's estimated that roughly 1 in every 6.5 East Germans was connected to the Stasi in some capacity.
Either as an officer or an unofficial collaborator.
They recruited spouses to spy on spouses, students to spy on teachers, doctors to spy on patients.
And the recruitment methods were diverse. Sometimes it was brutal blackmail, but often, as Schultz attempts here, it was framed as a moral obligation.
He pitches it to Rebecca as public-spirited work. He tries to appeal to her sense of civic duty to protect the state from enemies.
Rebecca is absolutely flabbergasted. She points out the glaring moral paradox of his request. She says, "You want me to be honest and trustworthy by spying on my friends."
But Schultz is too much of a zealot to grasp the irony.
However, as this bizarre interaction unfolds, a massive wave of relief washes over Rebecca.
She suddenly realizes Schultz is just a bumbling, low-level rookie who has blindly investigated the wrong Rebecca Hoffman.
He knows absolutely nothing about her high-profile capitalist father or her aristocratic grandmother.
She thinks she has dodged a massive bullet. She thinks she has survived the maze and is completely safe.
Which is a brilliant narrative mechanism in the source text. The tension is released, the listener exhales, Rebecca exhales.
Only for the trap to snap shut with tenfold force.
Exactly. Let's walk through this climax. It is, without a doubt, the most powerful, devastating scene we are looking at today.
Rebecca leaves the interrogation room. The adrenaline is fading into exhaustion.
She is walking down that nightmarish, mustard yellow hallway, heading toward the elevator to go home to her husband.
Up ahead, there is a group of Stasi men standing around, casually chatting.
And in the middle of them, wearing a very familiar, impeccably tailored light gray flannel suit, is her husband, Hans.
The way time slows down in this moment is incredibly realistic to how the brain processes acute trauma.
We experience this entirely through Rebecca's desperate cognitive dissonance. Her first thought isn't the truth.
Her first thought isn't, "My husband is a secret police officer."
Her immediate panic thought is, "Oh no, they arrested him too. He's a victim just like me."
The human mind will bend over backward to force new, contradictory evidence into its existing worldview to avoid a catastrophic collapse of reality.
But then she gets closer, and she hears one of the other men in the group deferentially say, "But with all due respect, Lieutenant."
And her brain simply stalls. The gears grind to a halt.
Civil servants who work in the Ministry of Justice, pushing paper, do not hold military ranks.
And then Hans turns and sees her. And what follows is a masterclass in reading human emotion.
Rebecca notes that men, in their moments of unguarded surprise, are incredibly easy to read.
A rapid-fire sequence of microexpressions crosses his face.
First, it's bafflement. It's the deep frown of seeing something profoundly familiar in a completely alien context.
It's like opening a filing cabinet and finding a bowl of hot soup.
He literally cannot process why the wife he left in a civilian car that morning is standing deep inside the highly secure, classified headquarters of the secret police.
Then comes the shock. The violent realization as his brain catches up to reality.
His mouth actually falls open.
But it's the third expression that completely shatters Rebecca's world.
His cheeks darken with a sudden, intense flush of shame.
And his eyes immediately shift away from hers in an unmistakable look of profound guilt.
And this brings us right back to your earlier point about the psychology of the deep cover operative. Does the operative maintain their identity? Can they lie that intimately without feeling the weight of it?
That flush of shame, the inability to hold her gaze, answers that question.
But I want to push back on what that shame actually represents. Let's look at the nuance here. Does that shame mean Hans actually loves her on some deeply repressed, genuine level?
Or is it simply the professional humiliation of an arrogant perfectionist spy who realizes he's been caught being sloppy?
Think about it. This is a guy who spends hundreds of hours building scale models out of matchsticks. He is utterly obsessed with control and precision.
Is he ashamed that he has destroyed the soul of the woman standing in front of him, or is he just deeply embarrassed that his cover was blown in front of his colleagues?
That is the perfect question, and I don't think it's as simple either.
I think the truth is a highly toxic, inseparable cocktail of both.
When you play a role for 2 years, when you share a bed, when you discuss your fears in the dark, when you build a shared vocabulary with another human being, the human brain simply cannot entirely compartmentalize that intimacy.
Even if the origin of the relationship was a cold bureaucratic order, the daily reality of it creates real neural pathways of connection.
So the shame is likely the horrific collision of both realities.
The crushing professional humiliation of an exploded operation and the deeply buried, terrifyingly human realization of the sheer sociopathic monstrosity of what he has done to this innocent woman.
And Rebecca, who is still desperately grasping at the absolute final straws of her reality, tries to give him an out.
She walks up to him and says, with an icy calm she doesn't feel, "Good afternoon, Lieutenant Hoffman."
She even turns to the rookie, Schultz, who has followed her out, and flows an explanation out loud.
She says, "I'm beginning to wonder whether he has had me under surveillance."
She is practically begging Hans to laugh it off, to pull out a badge from the Ministry of Justice, to call it a misunderstanding. She watches his eyes, waiting for him to construct a plausible cover story.
But she watches him fail, because there is no cover story on Earth that survives this specific intersection of worlds.
The Venn diagram of his lies has collapsed into a single, undeniable point of truth.
And then the fourth and final microexpression hits Hans' fury.
The paralyzing guilt instantly metastasizes into explosive, violent rage. But crucially, he doesn't direct it at Rebecca.
No, he directs it at Stoltz.
The idiot, bumbling rookie who blindly summoned a woman named Rebecca Hoffman without checking higher-level clearances.
Entirely ignorant of the fact that she was the target of a multi-year, highly classified, deep cover operation.
Hans moves with terrifying speed and brutality. He lashes out with a meaty right fist and punches Schultz directly in the face, splitting his lip and dropping him.
And in his rage, Hans screams the absolute undeniable truth, entirely abandoning the facade.
He yells, "You fucking fool. You've just undone 2 years of painstaking undercover work."
Just pause for a second and put yourself in Rebecca's shoes. Imagine the psychological freefall of that exact sentence.
It is a retroactive destruction of her entire timeline.
The funny phone calls weren't an ordinary lover. The ripped-up notes weren't mundane secrets.
The fact that he coldly reasoned they shouldn't have children yet wasn't because he was worried about a promotion.
It was because their entire marriage, every kiss, every shared meal, was a surveillance operation. It was just a job.
Every single memory she has of the last 2 years is instantly, irrevocably contaminated.
The foundation of her reality doesn't just crack, it vaporizes.
She realizes she wasn't just betrayed in the traditional sense, her actual life was stolen from her.
She was a biological prop in a state-sponsored theater production.
She looks at him and asks directly, coolly, "Did you marry me just to spy on me, Hans?"
And he can't even answer, he just stares at her.
He orders his men to throw Schultz in a holding cell, and Rebecca simply turns, steps onto the elevator, and escapes the building.
The sequence that follows her bus ride home is a fascinating, hyper-compressed study in the stages of grief.
She moves from profound, numb shock
Yeah.
into a deep, agonizing mourning for the life she thought she had.
But as she physically travels through the scarred, ruined landscape of Berlin, her internal landscape hardens.
The sadness burns away, leaving only a white-hot, diamond-hard, clarifying rage.
Because on that bus ride, she thinks about their proposal.
And this is the most sickening detail. She proposed to him,
They were at the fairy tale fountain, and she asked him to marry her.
and she realizes in hindsight that he probably never intended to take it that far.
The Stasi just wanted him to date her, to get a key to the house, to map the family's schedules and connections.
But when she proposed, she unwittingly forced his hand. He couldn't say no without raising suspicion.
He likely had to go back to his Stasi handlers, sit in a sterile room, and ask his commanding officers, do I break off the relationship and lose access to the target's network, or do I marry her?
The sheer bureaucratic coldness of that decision is staggering to contemplate.
Somewhere in that mustard yellow building, a committee of intelligence officers sat around a table, reviewed the operational parameters, and formally signed off on a marriage certificate as a tactical maneuver.
It makes your blood run cold. Which brings us to the final, incredibly cinematic confrontation.
Rebecca arrives back at her family home.
She walks in, and the house is full of life. Her mother, Carla, is there. Her younger sister, Lily, is doing homework at the table. Her brother, Wally, is practicing the piano.
It is a warm, beautiful snapshot of the exact family life Hans was sent to systematically destroy.
She walks past them, goes upstairs to the bedroom she shared with her husband, and the very first thing her eyes land on is Hans's model.
The matchstick model of the Brandenburg Gate. We have to dive deeply into the symbolism here because it is the linchpin of the entire narrative conclusion.
Hans has spent a solid year building this thing.
Every evening he saves spent matches, meticulously cuts them, and carefully glues them together on a heavy plywood board.
He has painstakingly constructed the pillars, and he's almost finished with the quadriga, the chariot of horses on top.
Think about what this object represents on a psychological level.
For hundreds of hours, Hans sat in the evenings, shoulder to shoulder with the woman he was actively deceiving.
To pass the time, to give his hands something to do while his mind was likely compiling surveillance reports, he painstakingly constructed a tiny, fragile, entirely artificial version of a famous, real-world landmark.
It is the exact physical manifestation of their marriage.
It's a tedious, totally artificial construction, built piece by tiny piece, relying on a foundation of cheap glue and dead wood.
It's a hollow, fragile replica of something that is supposed to be grand, enduring, and real.
It is the perfect metaphor. And as she is staring at this monument to his deception, Hans actually has the sheer, unmitigated audacity to pull up outside the house in his tan Trabant.
The absolute nerve.
Yeah.
Rebecca throws open the second-story window into the rain and screams at him to go away.
But he doesn't. He stops on the sidewalk looking up at her.
And Rebecca looks down at the floor, and she sees a pair of his handmade expensive shoes.
She picks one up, rears back, and heaves it out the window as hard as she can.
And then it connects. It hits him squarely on the top of the head.
The physical comedy of it is immediately juxtaposed with the immense gravity of the situation.
Her family rushes to the front doorway, completely shocked by the commotion. Her little sister is awestruck. Her teenage brother thinks it's crazy.
But what is absolutely crucial about this moment is the public nature of it. They are not fighting in the muffled privacy of a bedroom. They are out on the street.
Neighbors are opening their windows. Passers-by with umbrellas are stopping on the sidewalk to watch.
And Rebecca capitalizes on that audience. She doesn't keep his secret.
She shouts it out for the entire street to hear at the top of her lungs. You got married on the orders of the Stasi.
And then the killing blow. A female bystander on the street, watching this supposedly powerful man get pelted with footwear by his furious wife, laughs.
A loud, scornful, jeering cackle.
That single laugh is fatal to Hans's ego. For a Stasi officer, a man whose entire identity and authority rely on the invisible, terrifying, omnipotent aura of the state being publicly mocked, being made a literal laughingstock in the rain by an ordinary citizen, is the ultimate form of humiliation.
His institutional power is completely stripped away in that moment. He isn't a terrifying lieutenant. He is just a pathetic man getting beaten with a shoe.
He roars at her in absolute fury, but Rebecca's eyes have moved back to the model.
The heavy plywood board with the matchstick gate.
And Hans sees where she is looking, and he panics. His voice cracks. He yells up at her, "Don't you dare! I worked on it for a year!"
And her response is iconic, devastating, and perfect. She looks down at him and says, "That's how long I worked on our marriage."
And she heaves the massive board out the window.
The physical description of the model's destruction is deeply satisfying, but also incredibly final.
It turns over slowly in the rain-filled air. It hits the wet cobblestones and makes a pathetic sound like crumpled paper.
The matchsticks shatter and scatter across the pavement in a sunburst of destruction.
Everything he spent a year painstakingly faking is instantly crushed to absolute nothingness, just like the illusion of their life together.
Hans is left standing in the ruins of his operation. He is in shock.
But then, the paralysis fades. He recovers his posture. He points a finger up at her window.
And he delivers his final threat. He says, "You'll regret this, you and your family. You'll regret it for the rest of your lives, and that's a promise."
Notice the terrifying shift in his demeanor there. The embarrassed, humiliated husband who was worried about his hobby is completely gone.
The mask has been entirely obliterated along with the matchsticks.
All that is left standing on the wet pavement is the Stasi lieutenant, the cold, vindictive, soulless apparatus of the state.
He isn't making an angry marital threat in the heat of an argument. He is making a cold, state-sanctioned promise of systematic destruction.
It gives you absolute chills.
So, As we pull back and synthesize this incredible narrative, I keep coming back to the profound themes at play here.
This isn't just a story about a bad breakup. It is a grueling examination of the sheer, exhausting resilience required to maintain your humanity.
And your moral compass.
Right, in a society that is architecturally designed around suspicion, paranoia, and betrayal.
And it perfectly highlights the ultimate horror of totalitarianism. We often define oppressive regimes by their macro actions, controlling the newspapers, dictating the school curriculum, guarding the borders.
But the true suffocating horror is that the state feels entirely entitled to infiltrate the most sacred, private, intimate spaces of human existence.
They don't just want your obedience to the public square, they want to colonize your mind.
They turned a marriage bed into a forward operating base for an interrogation.
It brings me right back to what Rebecca told Bernd in the lunchroom before she knew the agonizing truth.
She said, marriage is a promise. You have to keep it against your inclination.
She believed in the absolute sanctity of loyalty. She was willing to endure a flawed, struggling marriage because she believed the vow itself meant something.
And that beautiful, principled belief in human connection is exactly what makes Hans's absolute, calculated deception so utterly devastating.
She was playing by the rules of human empathy and commitment, while he was playing by the rules of state surveillance and data extraction.
It is a profound violation that transcends simple heartbreak or infidelity. It is the literal theft of an individual's history, their agency, and their reality.
And so I want to leave you with a thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends.
We started by imagining waking up to find that the person sleeping next to you is a phantom, a state-sponsored illusion.
But the truly haunting question is what comes after. When your most fundamental anchor in the world, your marriage, your home, your very perception of what is real and what is a lie, is revealed to be a meticulously engineered fiction, how do you ever rebuild the capacity to trust another human being?